as it
The
becomes
publication
available
by the
today,
Development Board is the second
you'll
in a series of
sure
three.
that what I've said is sent. I was very pleased this morning that
from the tertiary sector, including consulting firms, advertising and property development, could go a long way to attracting industry to the Hunter
ensuring
Valley.
that the
He said,
distribution
however,
of
there
it.
is also a need to react quickly to opportunities, like Newcastle's response to the submarine contract for the Royal Australian Navy, which is being negotiated in Canberra.
And that certainly, if it comes to Newcastle, would be a very, very important fillip to the region because of its dependence, of course, on the heavy manufacturing aspect of industry in this particular area. You know, the immediate response from the Hunter region here when Canberra made its announcement about the submarines was for a support group to be put together that will be pushing the case for the Hunter region, and that's made up of representatives of this board and a number of other peak organisations in this region. But as well as that, the state government has appointed a board as well that will work entirely now on project definition and location definition for New South Wales. So the way to respond to the opportunities that are presented is to get out there and really sell it, and that'll be the job of those support groups.
The identity of Professor Cyril Rennick's successor has been a closely guarded secret, but the announcement was made that not one but 4 people will take over the reins when the good professor retires at the end of next month. Former Deputy Dr. William Paradise will take on the position of Acting Director of Research until the end of the year, when a new director will be appointed. James McKay will become the Chief Manager of Fundraising, and Roger Geary has been made the Secretary of the Foundation. But the man wielding the most power will be the newly appointed board member, Professor Michael Carter. Professor Carter is the founding head of Newcastle University's Sociology Department and Deputy Chairman of the University Senate. He says the foundation will continue on the same successful course as a tribute to its founder.
There have been many tributes to Professor Rennick over the last few weeks. I think perhaps the finest tribute, however, would be to ensure the continuation of the excellence which he had engendered in this region, and that will be the task of the board and of myself.
Professor Rennick reiterated the importance of the foundation remaining independent, and he says with the money that the Premier promised a fortnight ago, that will be possible. Let's clear the air. That's the slogan the State Pollution Control Commission is using for the introduction of lead-free petrol. As of January next year, all new cars will only use lead-free petrol, and it will be against the laws of trying to put leaded petrol into these cars, not to mention being difficult. The new cars will have a smaller petrol filler to accommodate the new nozzles, and according to the State Pollution Control Commission, the unleaded petrol won't cost any more, and it won't cut down on fuel economy or car performance. Michael Mole.
Performance will be about the same, but over a period of time, in 2 or 3 years, we expect to see efficiencies improved because of the new technologies that will be introduced.
What are some of the main misconceptions about lead-free petrol?
Well, there's a lot of people believe very sincerely that once unleaded petrol is in, their car efficiency will drop, their performance will drop, and that's really not so at all. On the other hand, lots of people believe that their cars are going to blow up by using unleaded petrol, and that's not so at all. There will be no problems at all, no durability problems at all. In fact, if you've got a vehicle that can use it now, you should, because there will be certain maintenance advantages. Your spark plugs will last longer, your oil will last longer, your exhaust systems and mufflers will last longer.
The drop-in centre is part of the Community Youth Development Program of the International Year for Youth. Its aim is to provide a place for young people to go on a Thursday or Friday night. A Thursday youth centre will support, play guitar or even rap band. But eventually, the organisers hope young people will formulate their own programs. Project Committee Chairman Karen Lee Cunningham.
We're hoping that the kids will give us their ideas about what they want in the centre, so we haven't got a program developed yet, but we're hoping that things like craft nights and music nights will eventuate.
What kind of kids are you after to come in?
We're after kids that have very little resources and usually just hang out in the streets, and we're trying to get them into a more friendly, supportive environment.
BDFA member Fiona Hawley-Corey went into a search with Newcastle following the union's refusal to attend against Marshall. However, R.W. Miller says if the union was to try to press his company conditions at an aggregate meeting on Monday, the men would be re-engaged without discrimination. Those conditions are that they operate a large new front-end loader with only one man, and that there is no harassment of 24 plant operators engaged by the company yesterday. A National Mining Union Liaison Committee meeting took place in Sydney yesterday, at which it was decided that no industrial action will be taken over the sackings, at least until after the aggregate meeting at Singleton. A spokesman for R.W. Miller, Peter Murray, says that the matter of entitlement for those re-engaged at Mount Thorley if a return to work is decided on Monday would be a matter for the local coal authority.
580 front-end loader.
Despite the rain, St George trained for a brief period at the International Sports Centre to familiarise themselves with the layout. Coach Roy Masters sees the transfer of the game to Newcastle
Using a home ground advantage of Cog Road?
No, not at all. We tend to play better in front of big crowds. We've had a couple of home games that have been transferred to the cricket ground this year, and we've had big crowds, and our players they always play better in front of bigger crowds, and so I think that that will be more than offset by the fact that we're playing away from Cogra.
Is it fair to say the only position you've never really settled on during the season so far is 5'8"?
Yes, that's very true. We thought at the beginning of the season that we'd be right with Paul Morris. He had a lot of injuries in 84, and unfortunately they've carried on into 85, and now he's out for about another month. That is our problem spot.
I do hear a rumour that maybe you're talking to a former rugby union international. Is that true or false?
Oh, no, that's not true at all. You're talking about Mark Eller, of course.
Sure.
Oh, well, he'd be a great acquisition to rugby league, but at this stage, he's not a St George player.
Is there still on the subject of red and white at South Newcastle Club's 75th reunion this weekend, with a match against arch-rivals West on Sunday as its final chapter. The club is one of the originals. Their first match, the 14th of May 1910, against West, by the way. South have won the premiership 7 times, their first in 1927, their last in 1976. And they've produced 6 internationals: Andy Norval, Jim and Alf Gibbs, Ned Andrews, Les Johns and Gary Banks. The best player to have played for them was probably Brian Carlson, but that could be argued. Their 2-game record holders are still favourite sons in Barry Lawrence, number 8, and a halfback, Puddy Miller. But Peter Diamond, who coached them to win it in 1968, provides their fondest memory. A kick from inside his own half to put West out of the 1968 final. They still talk about it, and they'll be hoping for a repeat when they play West at Townsend Oval on Sunday.
Meet C.H. Sullivan, a Baptist evangelist who took London by storm in the 1900s and who, to this day, is one of history's most quoted preachers. Before a capacity congregation at the Islington Baptist Church, Spurgeon was brought to light by modern-day preacher Dr. Craig Skinner. A professor of preaching at the Golden Gate Seminary in San Francisco, Australian-born Dr. Skinner has been touring the country with his show. The combination of anecdotes, thoughts and worship may seem unusual these days, but it's pretty strikingly effective. I talked to Dr. Skinner after the show.
Well, I'm presenting the life and ministry of a famous Victorian preacher, Charles Haddon Spurgeon, And this is really a reversal. In the early days of the church, drama was used a great deal. Before Bibles were printed, you know, they had stained glass windows, and the preacher would talk about Peter and Paul in the windows, and sometimes there'd be plays called miracle plays where they acted out the stories of the gospel. So it's really an old way of communicating Christian truth that we're using in a new form.
Set in lush countryside behind Tuggerah, the Mater D College is a great improvement over rented premises in East Gosford that Catholic high school students began going to in 1983. The new school began operating at the beginning of this year, but it was only yesterday that it received the blessing of the church. The Archbishop of Sydney, Reverend Edward Clancy, performed the rite, accompanied by the Federal Education Minister, Senator Susan Ryan. While the Sydney Catholic Diocese bought the land, the federal government provided just over half the money to build the school. The rest of the $2.2 million cost was raised by the parishes of Tukley, and Princeton Wye. Parish members have been hoping for a high school for many years, and they turned out in force for the official opening ceremony. In opening the school, Senator Ryan said it was an example of what can be achieved by cooperation between the church and the state. Several speakers, including the Archbishop, Reverend Clancy, commented on the college's excellent facilities. Those facilities will receive a boost next year when extensions, including a music room and a computer lab, will be built. For the moment, it's only students up to Year 10 who are enjoying this standard of education. However, a senior high school will be built on adjoining land by the end of 1987.
The thing about all the folk down the farm is that they're all likeable and very human. So to move the stage was not that hard. The action centres around the farm and kids extolling the virtues of Singlet, as long as they're breast. Then there's the sheep, and Aunt Dolly with her now famous pikelet recipe.
Take 2 cups of flour and half a cup of sugar, 2 fresh eggs and a pinch of salt and a dash of milk to mix in the batter. You mustn't burn the butter, but the griddle should be hot. Pour a spoonful of batter in a sizzling pan. Cook until golden and give them a flip. Serve them with butter while the piping hot. Make sure Wallace doesn't eat the lot.
The tractor ready for the morning. Comes out to the farm in town, and the romance really starts to sizzle. As usual, under the water tank in the backyard.
Do you know what I...
The success of the show is the familiarity we all share with the characters. So, how do they get the dog onto the stage?
Talk to me, Wal.
Very carefully. I'm not
Say something.
the dog on television, because if I do, you won't need to come and see the show. The dog is a very important part of the show, yes. Come along and have a look and see how we do it. Everybody seems to have approved so far.
Even Murray Ball, the creator of the characters?
Oh yes, Murray's seen this show heaven knows how many times, both here and in New Zealand. He was very careful about what he let the creators do in regards to his characters, because he is very protective of them. And he is totally happy with what has been done with the characters.
What do you think the success is of a farm scene? Why is it such a successful cartoon and now a musical?
I think because a large number of people can identify with it, firstly, and secondly because it is very funny.
TNT All-Trans ran aground on a reef off Gladstone, Queensland in late March this year. Downtime on the alumina bulk carrier is very expensive, and the owners were extremely anxious to have the ship operating as soon as possible. Almost 150 people of various skills have been working on the contract around the clock.
Been a lot of steel used in this job. How much?
In a round figure, probably about 150 tonne of steel.
And a lot of men have been used?
Yes, we've had a lot of casual labour from around Newcastle, and it's been quite good for the unemployment in the area.
Is this one of the biggest jobs the dockyard's ever handled?
Would be one of the biggest jobs of this type for this steel repair. I'm led to believe it's one of the biggest jobs in steel repair in Australia for quite some time.
Recent rain and heavy winds caused about 2.5 days delay, and the dockyard is negotiating for an extension on the deadline. The ship was due out at the floating dock today, but will now go back in the water next Thursday. The oil tanks will be immediately followed by the Pacific Guardian, a cable laying vessel, docking to rig blasting and hydrogen. The dockings have delayed the commissioning of new submarine tank stations. Equipment value of $1.3 million being installed, the trials will have to wait until the dock is empty. Equipment, the most modern of its type in the world, this is a mobile workstation further reducing docking time.
The meeting at the Old Newcastle Police Station had a positive atmosphere. The members of the Glenrock Community Advisory Committee are all extremely thankful that the auction of the Arthur Bailey estate has been postponed. They criticised, however, moves by the city administration to allow the Bailey family to subdivide 1/3 of the land for residential development in return for giving the rest to the recreation area. As this map shows, the Arthur Bailey estate and the adjoining property owned by a Bailey family company form a large part of the intended state recreation area. One speaker said any residential development south of Scenic Drive would degrade the park and pollute the downstream area of Murdering Gully. The meeting decided to publicly demand that the state government buy the Arthur Bailey estate. They want the government to honour the promise made in March by the State Planning and Environment Minister Bob Carr to make the whole area from Scenic Drive south to Dudley a park.
Money seems to be available in other places, in Sydney, to buy parkland, and this is the first time that the state government had a real opportunity to show that they really care about the state recreation area proposal, and they should buy this block of land.
The Bureau, which is known for its economic statistics, is rating in the field of community welfare. But Mr. Gaspar says the Bureau needs more people.
An element of that, and that's the purpose of the visit. The ABS is on a program of trying to visit local communities in about once every 2 years, although Newcastle is a special case, to talk to people and say, this is the sort of data that's available and here's how you go about using it. Could I make the point? We have an information services unit set up in Sydney that has highly trained officers whose task is to answer public inquiries.
Away for points. The margin's 10, 27 to 17. Stuart Begg. Now Ian Davies. Back to Ian Revillion. Ian Davies pops it over the top there.
He's got the inside running. Can't put it away. Gets the rebound again.
Got it that time. 29 to 17.
10 points to Horrell.
Brilliantly at times and did not field their gun player Jimmy Bacon, who could have played, but is saving himself for the big weekend away.
Shooting percentage early in the game. Newcastle 68%. Killed the 35.
Players would be an injustice. Wide margin there, and the Falcons on top by 10 points as a result. Off the bench who came into the game to play superbly.
An overlap
there is
here.
A confidence about the side now that has not been in
Scott
evidence
Horrell, oh
since
yeah.
NBL started
Wait till the
in
traffic went by and
1979.
just simply leapt up and knocked it.
All brand new and built locally in regard to the best that's 21 plus one Firebird are 21 for Connolly, scaled up from twin water races. The boats which feature water and fuel ballast systems, set balanced in varying conditions, are worth in excess excess of $100,000 each. The men's team is headed by Sydney's Jeff Hardacre and includes Rory Brown of Illawarra, Mark Pickering of Queensland and Murray Hackett of